Well, hey everybody, great to be with you today. Thanks for joining us again this morning. And I've just come back from a couple of weeks a break. Deb and I have been away down the south coast and done things like whale watching and just having a bit of good R&R, which has been exciting. But it's great to be back sharing with you this morning. And I want to share some thoughts around robust righteousness. And I think if 2020 has done nothing else other than challenge our robustness, I think that's one of the things that has come out of this season for us. And 2020 has dealt sort of all sorts of hardships that none of us have been kind of experienced before. We've never walked through pandemic before. And so it's been an exciting sense and season in that. And I know a couple of times in the past I've made comment to the effect that really I believe that Christians like you and I are built for these kind of seasons. There's and the reason for that is that we actually understand suffering. We understand what it is to go through tough times because we're wired to actually walk through tough times. We've got a perspective on hardship and suffering that's born out of our relationship with Jesus Christ and that robust righteousness that comes from walking with Him. Philippians 3:8-11 in the Message reads this way. It says, "The very credentials these people are waving around as something special, I'm tearing up and throwing out with the trash, along with everything else I used to take credit for. And why? Because of Christ. Yes, all the things I once thought were so important are gone from my life. Compared to the high privilege of knowing Jesus Christ as my master, firsthand, everything I once thought I had going for me is insignificant. Dog dung. I've dumped it all in the trash so that I could embrace Christ and be embraced by Him. I didn't want some petty inferior brand of righteousness that comes from keeping a list of rules when I could get the robust kind that comes from trusting Christ, God's righteousness. I gave up all that inferior stuff so I could know Christ personally, experience His resurrection power, be a partner in His suffering, and go all the way with Him to death itself. If there was any way to get in on the resurrection from the dead, I wanted to do it." They're powerful words written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Philippi. But I love that phrase, robust righteousness, that comes from trusting Christ and enables us to endure suffering. And so whether the suffering comes through circumstantial things that we have no control over, such as a pandemic, or maybe it's brought upon us by just virtue of some decisions that we've made that have not been the best, or maybe it's just a fact of life. Whatever it is, there's something inside of us. There's a robustness that comes from walking with Jesus. I like the way Francis Chan puts it. He says, "We pursue Jesus and suffering always accompanies Him." And he goes on to say, "The call to follow Christ is the call to joyfully endure suffering in this life for the promise of eternal blessing in the next." There's an inevitability about us walking with Christ that means we're going to learn how to navigate and endure suffering. The thing about the cross was that it created an offense for many people. The offense of the cross was that people couldn't grasp the concept of a suffering Messiah. Back in the day when Jesus was around, the religious people were expecting a glorious Messiah to come and reign in all authority and splendor and glory and everything else. And Jesus did not fit that model or that expectation. The pastor and writer T.A. Sparks observes it this way. He says, "They, being the Pharisees, had their own mind made well up both as to what kind of Messiah their Messiah would be and as to what He would do. And anything that ran counter to that mentality was not only not accepted, it was an offense." And I kind of think, the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, got offended because Jesus didn't meet their expectations. I tend to think not much has changed, because it's pretty easy for us to get offended when we find that Jesus hasn't met up to our expectations. Maybe maybe our prayers haven't been answered the way we wanted them to, or healing hasn't come, or provision has been delayed. Maybe our efforts have been taken for granted, or our sacrifice is not acknowledged. We're just tempted to throw it all in and say, well, who really cares anyway, or what's it all about? And we've lost sight of Jesus and the price that he paid, and what the cross involved. And so maybe we need to just reorientate our expectation and our thinking about Christ and the cross, and not take on board the offense that can so easily come, and instead embrace that robust righteousness that comes from walking with Christ. Acts 13:27 says this: "The people in Jerusalem and their leaders did not recognize Jesus as one of the prophets that had been spoken about. Instead, they condemned him, and in doing this, they fulfilled the prophet's words that are read every Sabbath." So what's actually being said there is that even though they were reading the prophetic words every week, every time they went to church, they heard prophetic words about Jesus, and yet they didn't recognize him when he turned up in their midst. And it's a sobering reminder, I think, that we can go through the religious duties and actually miss what Jesus is doing and saying to us in this moment and in this time. They had the words of the prophets read to them every week and still didn't recognize what God was doing. And so I think part of having a robust righteousness in our faith is that we are able, in the midst of uncertainty and situations that don't meet our expectations, we can be examples of robust righteousness. So don't get offended when things don't work out the way you think they should. Don't get offended and walk away when God doesn't come through, or Jesus lets you down because he hasn't met your expectations. Instead, pursue him and develop that robust righteousness in your soul. God bless you. Have a great week, and we'll see you again soon.